You're listening to Combat Radio with Ethan Dettenmeyer, right here on LA Talk Radio.
Good morning and welcome to Combat Radio. I'm Ethan Dettenmeyer. So with me to start the show is producer, charity advocate, and, well, there's so many different ways to describe you, but Miss Loda Hadley is sitting in to start things off.
Hello.
Hello, how are you?
Fine.
Today actually is probably going to be one of the more interesting interviews. It's part two. I'm going to draw a quick connection with our audience. It's part two with Sven Thorsen. And immediately you probably recognize him from Hunt for Red October, Total Recall, Predator, Conan the Barbarian, hundreds of movies, Raw Deal. But he actually, while you were at Warner Brothers last night, I was reading his book. There is no English version yet, so I read the Danish version of it. But it's actually quite interesting, and it talks, if you're interested in sort of inside film politics, from his close relationship to actor, now Governor Schwarzenegger, to Stallone, to Grace Jones, John Milius, to almost choking out Steven Seagal, to fighting with Mickey Rourke and tackling his bodyguards. It's going to be an interesting interview. It's part two. Last time he was on the show, he talked a little bit about his role against Russell Crowe in Gladiator, some of what it was like getting involved, and from getting involved from in Hollywood from Denmark, working in Spain on Conan the Barbarian for Milius, who's someone I respect greatly as a person and as a filmmaker. But it's going to be a quite interesting interview, I think. It's part two. I don't know how many parts we're ultimately going to do, because quite frankly, it never gets dull with him. So that's where we're actually going to take the audience in a few minutes, and I think you're going to actually find this interesting. Normally, I don't tip the listening public off to who our guest is for a few minutes into the show, but I think this one's really going to be pretty interesting. Do you have any thoughts, Loda? I see you're reading something over there and not paying attention to a word I'm saying. So would you like to say anything considerate at this point in time?
Actually, I was just trying to see if the book that you brought in was the Danish version.
No. The Danish version I had to read was sent to me from his manager in Denmark. It's something that was emailed. But it's very interesting. I mean, I can't. It doesn't necessarily translate in a way where I think a lot of Americans who know Danish can actually follow it, but it's pretty interesting. It's a pretty interesting book, and he's got a lot of exceptional story. I mean, he's an exceptional man in a lot of ways. I've got to tell you. I mean, the book actually goes back to the Nazi occupation of Denmark and the work of the Dutch underground, or the Danish underground, rather. I'm sorry. There was a Dutch underground too, but let's not get the nationalities confused. But the work of the Danish underground and what they did to prohibit, like, the railways from working. And, I mean, it gets into, the smuggling of cigarettes and that racket. It's a very interesting book from his childhood to where he embraced, bodybuilding and meeting Schwarzenegger from the Pumping Iron at the moment Pumping Iron was released. It's a very interesting book, and he's going to be our guest here, so if you'll hang tight, and we'll start shortly. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to get Sven on the phone from his place in Santa Monica. Now, as I said, he's pretty well known for many different things. He's an exceptional personality. I had the privilege of reading his book, an advanced copy of the book. It's not available in English yet, but it will be shortly, it looks like. And the book itself, though in Danish, is actually quite entertaining. And, you would know him from everything from, like I said a moment before the musical break, from Conan the Barbarian to Hunt for Red October to Predator, Total Recall. We're going to call this guy up right now. But we're actually going to get off of the surface topics of the movies he was in and get right into some of the politics he's had to contend with within the business. And this should be pretty fascinating. All right, we're calling him.
This is Sven.
Sven, Ethan, how are you?
Hey, Ethan, how are you?
I'm good. Welcome back to Combat Radio. With me is producer Loda Hadley.
Hi, how are you?
Good for them.
Yes.
Yeah. Hi, guys.
Hi, how are you?
Hey, hi, Sven. How are you?
Everyone's doing well. And I got to tell you, Sven, last night I read your book. And you were actually, when I called you briefly, I called Sven to confirm today's interview, and he goes, and I said, I'm reading your book, and he goes, yeah, don't puke all over it.
Don't puke all over it, yeah.
But there's nothing.
That's a Danish way of kind of be sarcastic with your own doings. Mm-hmm. Because in Denmark we don't brag. We are actually very humble.
So
for me to now be try to Americanize myself, I have been trying for many years, is still difficult. It's very hard to talk about yourself.
Yeah, it is. I agree. But it's
I hear you, boss.
There really is very little to puke about where your book is concerned. I mean, I have to tell you, this book gets fascinating quick because, just to give a little bit of foreshadowing, you talk about the Nazi occupation, the Dutch underground, cigarette smuggling. You get into your own very, very honest steroid use and what it did to you. But really, you get into a very fast track about trying to contend with Hollywood politics. And there's a couple of moments I'd like to just jump to. I mean, we could talk about this book all day, all week. It's very interesting, actually. But, the one thing...
Go for it.
You talked very briefly about, you formed a relationship with Stallone, and it was such where they invited you over to their house, and he made you lunch while you talked, as if and you say as if you had known each other your whole lives. And his house was decorated with his own art. And at one point, because of the two titans of Schwarzenegger, who you were close friends with, and Stallone, being the action heroes they were, there was some bantering between the two in the press, and Schwarzenegger was savvy enough to ask you to put together a meeting at Patrick's Roadhouse for the two of them to sit down and try and smooth it out.
Exactly.
And I found that interesting because they were both smart enough to realize they had to sit down and kind of put a lid on things, and they were also smart enough to know that you were of the personality of such who can arrange that in a way that wouldn't embarrass them in any way. But you said privately after the meeting, I mean, you can discuss, I'd like to know really how that meeting went, first of all, when they both arrived. Did one make...
First of all,
go ahead.
Both of them are, extremely smart. And, but also they are like average guys, when you hang with guys in the locker room, everybody's the same. And actors and people that is known in the press are not different people. They just have a different kind of a job, but they all have the same needs. You have to go to the bathroom, you have to eat, you have to sleep, you have to make love, you have to work and all that stuff. But in this particular case, there has been some press where they were kind of talking bad about each other and stuff, and Arnold said, set up a meeting. I want to kind of straighten it out. So they met, and afterwards they both said to me, we tried, but I think Arnold have too much of an ego, and Arnold said, I think Stallone had too much of an ego, so they couldn't really kind of find each other, but they tried.
And so the conversation was, obviously they know who each other is, and who starts the dialogue, and how does the other respond? Take us inside that huddle, if you could.
It was based on the bad press, and they really tried to talk it out. They had a long lunch, and they bonded because they both have a lot of similarities. They're both physical, and but they couldn't really reach each other. But I think they kind of made some kind of a peace amongst them, and since then there has been no bad press where they talk bad about each other. So I thought that was pretty smart of them to do that.
You said that aside from your diplomatic ability to put them in a room together, and Patrick's Roadhouse, incidentally, is a great choice for a meeting like that because the food's awesome.
Uh-huh.
But you said that they both privately came to you after the meeting and said, it's never going to work out. His ego's too big.
No, that's what they said.
Yeah.
That's what they said. But since then, they started working together on Planet Hollywood, and they were seen together in the press, hugging each other and all kind of stuff. So at least they make some kind of a peace amongst themselves.
Yeah,
so there was no competition because Arnold is Arnold and John Wayne is John Wayne and Stallone is Stallone. You can't really compare anybody to each other. They all have their own stuff.
You said...
But Stallone, when I met him the first time, I was so impressed because the impression of Stallone was the Rambo character, the Rocky character, and now in his house, he was so sophisticated, he was so well dressed, he smelled nicely, he's an artist, he's a painter, he's a sculptor, and he's a philosopher, and I was so impressed. So I said to Arnold, you guys should hang. And based on that, we had that meeting, so...
You said that when you traveled with
I'm
Stallone...
a guy of common sense, so that's why both of them kind of like me to be the kind of a bumper, or intermediate guy or whatever. Because common sense is that there's space for all of us, and competition on that level is not necessary. That's my philosophy.
That's a good philosophy.
You're listening to Combat Radio with Ethan Dettenmeyer, right here on LA Talk Radio.